Hello, my name's David Hood. I'm the founding director of the Edinburgh Institute. We set up the Edinburgh Institute to look at competitive advantage, particularly for small to medium-sized enterprises, and not just giving them a little polish, but to actually give them and craft with them a lasting competitive advantage and edge, and one that would last up to 2 years. So in this webinar, I'm going to cover what competitive advantage is, what's wrong with it, and how you can put it right. I'll give you a short demonstration as well as to how you can get 2 years of an advantage. So we'll start off with the bad news and then we'll progress to the good news, so stay tuned. Now this is a typical boardroom or a typical meeting about strategy, marketing, whatever. And this is what happens. Our unique selling point, our competitive advantage, got it. It's this new thing that everyone is doing. And unfortunately, that's the way we work. That's the way companies work. That's the way management thinking works. And this is a jocular example of innovation run riot. You've got a mobile phone with an electric toothbrush or a hair trimmer or an oyster knife or a curling iron. Now, okay, that's a bit farcical, but still it shows you what happens when we desperately try to get this new competitive advantage and we ignore what we could actually be doing. And this indeed is what we do daily. We look at our offer on a daily basis, whether we've got some commercial constraints, we've got some new resources, we've got some competitor activity, we've got feedback from the customer, whatever it is. What we do is we get the product and service offer and we slowly and surely just do these little tweaks. And quite frankly, tweaking is not good enough because it's never going to give you that exceptional product or service and never going to give you that exceptional position in the marketplace. So you will not realize the true value of what you're providing. So tweaking, we have to stop the tweaking. Now, these four images illustrate some of the problem. The top left there is that no matter the competitive issue for an organization, they will tell you that they never have the time nor the money to get their offer right first time. But they always have that money, or they have to find the money later on when they're trying to put the product or service or the offer right thereafter. So tweaking with it, again, is not commercially viable either because you spend an awful lot of money making big mistakes. The second one is a comparison between the Moon, Mars, and the Earth's ocean. We've mapped out both the Moon and Mars, yet 95% of the Earth's ocean remains unmapped and misunderstood or not understood. And I think that's analogous with our company and our competitors. We've got them 100% marked out. But our customers and our markets, I would suggest that that mapping is a little less formidable, and we don't look after our customer as well as we could do. And the last two illustrations there show you how, it's in a jocular fashion again, innovation gone daft and promotion gone daft. Yes, if only we had a way to cover those oranges that didn't waste so much on plastic. And the last one, of course, buy one beer for the price of two and get the second one absolutely free. Jocular, yes, but they carry a serious message. And modern management thinking, we do grasp at it. We read books. There's some very good work done in marketing, especially out there, about how companies can improve, about how we can improve our offer to the marketplace. But what we do is we just use the same old thinking and we use the same old processes. And indeed, we're using the same things others are using. We wash it, rinse it, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, and we go through the same cycle. When we find ourselves in trouble, we just go through the same cycle of trying to desperately polish up our offer. And in doing so, the rinse and repeat, we actually end up doing the same as our competitors because they're actually going through the same cycle of wash, rinse, and repeat. They're using the same anecdotes, the same case studies, the same business thinking, the same models and paradigms that you're accessing. So you're ending up with the same business almost and the same definition of the industry. And if you take this to its logical conclusion, if you have got this 2 years of a marked 2-year advantage over your other competitors, then surely you can define the market in your terms. And that's what we're about. And the strange thing is I've found over the period is that your competitive advantage is rarely, if ever, where and what you think it is. And you tweak everywhere in desperation because of that. And that's astounding revelation to me, because you always think you know, either passionately or you know intrinsically what your advantage is, and you may even have a good understanding of why you're slightly ahead or slightly behind in the marketplace. But your competitive advantage is rarely, if ever, what you think it is. And that is indeed why we tweak constantly. So I would rather you went for the 2-year advantage, something sustainable, something meaningful, that was going to be meaningful for you, your customer, and your bottom line. And in doing so, as I say, create your own market. And don't follow the crowd, because the crowd, the competitor, they're all doing these things. They're all taking the next best thing and applying it. So if you just do that, you're not going to be any different. And the good news is, well, that's all the bad news, but the good news is your value is higher than you think to a small number of people. And this is good. So what am I asking you to do? I'm not asking you to take on more resources, spend an awful lot of time horizon scanning or scenario planning. I'm not asking you to skill up. I'm not asking you to buy a software. I'm not asking you to buy into even the next best thing. What I'm trying to get you to do is to think quite differently. And that is where the key is. That's why I firmly believe you can do it. You may not believe so far, but that's where it lies. It's in the changing your way of thinking about how you view competitive advantage, and stop following the fads. So in my humble opinion, I think there's 2 ways of looking at competitive advantage. There's the Mediocristan door, the door to Mediocristan. You can go in there and follow the latest fad, take the latest business model, the paradigm shift or whatever it is that's coming up today or this week. Within the chattering classes, you can try that, or you can think differently and do competitive advantage, which is based on limitations. So to paraphrase the great Ellie Goldratt, if you change your price or do some promotion, you get 2 days of an edge. If you tweak a little bit more and you can change your product or service feature, which we do quite often again, you can get 2 months of an edge. But if you change something that's underneath the noses of all in your market, where a need is not satisfied properly, you can get up to 2 years of an edge. So where is that competitive advantage? And can you make it compelling to give you that edge? So where is your competitive advantage? Well, I firmly believe it starts in the limitations that are placed upon you, whether they're limitations on the company or limitations in the market. And again, I'm not just talking about resources and skills and money and the usual suspect things. I'm talking about some fundamental things that underpin the problem in the marketplace, which if you discover is the thing that can lead you to 2 years of an advantage. Now, the next 2 illustrations I'm going to show you are generic ones, but these are the kind of things that you can build up with this knowledge to make them very, very specific to yourself, and they're extremely powerful. Here's a little constraint, a limitation, if you like, for many companies, for most indeed. To appeal to the market, there's a common objective on the left-hand side. Now, to appeal to the market, you have to do 2 things. You have to tap into customer wants and have a range of options to meet all eventualities and tastes. But you also have to understand customer needs better, so you can deliver precisely what you want to deliver and be seen as the best. Now, the trouble is with both those options, they're both necessary, but one suggests you need to have a widest range as possible of products and services as an offer. But the other way, or at least the other necessary condition to understand customer needs better, you have to focus on a narrow range as possible. Now, I'm sure you've dealt with this conflict yourself on many an occasion. And as I say, this is generic just now, so hold your disbelief just now, because effectively this is just demonstrating that you can get down to this level of thinking, which will give you the result you look for in your constraints and limitations that are placed in front of you. Now, the second slide here shows delivery. And the common objective in this case is create, innovate, be attractive, and provide value to shareholders, or stakeholders, I should say. And in order to do that, you have to have an internal focus and an external focus. And the internal focus means that you have to deliver shareholder value by maximizing transactions, margins, market share, etc. And in order to do that, you have to deliver to our needs, to the company's needs. But you also have to have an external focus, which means that you have to create market differentiated value based on customer priorities and requirements. So in order to do that, you have to deliver to customers' needs. Now, customers' needs and our needs might be two different things entirely. Now, as I say, these are only very simple examples to show you the level that you can get down to that actually can crack your own competitive advantage. Because in cracking these are endemic things that happen in your industry. And if you can crack them, then you've won a watch. You've actually got something that's relevant to your customer. So that's just a small illustration of the kind of logic we pulled together, which means that you can actually not just work out your competitive advantage, but you can see the logic behind it and why it's the best advantage at the exclusion of all other options. Because there's one wonderful thing about finding your competitive advantage. Your singular best competitive advantage is not just intrinsically that you found it, but you can dump all the other things that could have happened or could have been explored or could have invested a lot of money in. So you stop wasting your time and tweaking. To give you three small examples here, I don't like using case studies because I do find that your case will be completely different from everybody else's, so it becomes a bit glib. But I'm showing you these three different cases purely and simply to demonstrate the logic behind all of this. Now, there's a small physiotherapy practice in Glasgow. Now, they had the challenge whereby they went into office buildings, they offered a service to look at the employees of a company, those that were doing high impact sports or running or cycling to work each day or whatever, but they were active people. And they thought it would be fantastic for a client company, an office-based client company perhaps, to look after their staff better because it'd be seen as a perk to the employees and, there'd be a lot more harmony in the workplace. Now, they had some limited success with that, but then they decided to change that somewhat and flip it over using this kind of thinking. What they did was they ended up providing a service whereby they went in, audited all those who do sports and have a high impact injuries or may have or could have high impact injuries. What they did was they audited them, then they went in at a specific time, at a specific date, on a monthly basis, and checked people up beforehand. So instead of having a service whereby it was a stress purchase, whereby the client bought it when they needed it, and by that time the injury was already there, what they had was a service which delivered on an ongoing basis, which prevented many injuries from happening in the first place. And the result of that was not only just a better uptake in the marketplace, but clients were actually saying that the level of absenteeism was down through injury, which is real money in the bank for the client, but it wasn't seen as a stress purchase. Completely changing the marketplace. Another one is Scottish Water Laboratories. Now, Scottish Water Laboratories, they look after the samples. They've basically taken samples of water internally and they get samples from externally from private sector. Now, we were working on the private sector side of things, and what they do is they provide analysis of these samples to food companies, to petrochemical companies, to waste companies, whatever, and give them a result back. Now, they found out that that was very difficult because the market, there's a lot of bucket shop chemistry laboratories in the marketplace, and they knew their service was better. But it wasn't enough just to polish it up and make it look better. We had to do this logic, and we changed it around to look at what is the current problem in the marketplace. And what was limiting these companies in their market, the analysis market, was this price per sample. They were fixated on price per sample. The whole of the market lives on price per sample. We used these conflict clouds that you've just seen, and we found out that the one conflict at the bottom of all their limitations was this notion that you had to have a price per sample, because the conflict was verbalized as the laboratory wants samples, the client wants the least possible samples, which is an obvious one. But again, that showed the conflict between the two. So therein, if you can find the conflict that underpins all your limitations, you can then get to a solution. And the solution wasn't just to not charge per sample. It was done in a very logical flow so that they knew the whole package was more than just let's change the way we price things. And what happened was, with a particular good example, is a company. There was a company who takes over old industrial landscapes, brownfield sites, makes them right again, so it repurposes them back to the client, so the client can then use it or sell it on or whatever. So their interest is in finding out what's in that land before they treat it and before they shift the soil. Now, the difficulty they have is they want to do as little samples as possible, and the laboratory wants as many samples as possible. So, with this new package whereby they weren't charged per sample, what they did was they then were able to, for the first time ever, to actually sample where they needed to sample without limitations on budget, which cut down not just their budget or their expenditure, it cut down the time and effort they had to spend in doing all these safety meetings and analysis meetings and all sorts of other things. So the net result for the laboratory is they got a happy customer. The customer was delighted because they were able to do more projects. They sat down and had a little bit of an analysis after after a few months as to see how the relationship was going. And we realized that what happened was we had changed the currency. The currency used to be on one side, we want lots of samples, so the laboratory's currency was samples. The client's was, I just want to shift soil. So all of a sudden, the laboratory was shoulder to shoulder with the client and shifting soil. No longer were they seen, again, as a stress purchase. They shifted not just soil with the client, but they shifted the whole model, the whole paradigm, the way the industry is done. And that is where competitive advantage lies for 2 years. The last example I'll give you is Rolls-Royce. Now, Rolls-Royce, the division that looks after the airplane engines, effectively is a parts and labour place. So they get the airplane engine comes in from the airline, they look after it, maintain it, swap the parts, do whatever's necessary, and hand it back again. Now, again, the conflict at the bottom of that, I would suggest, is why Rolls-Royce went this particular way, because the conflict was the Rolls-Royce made money when the planes were on the ground, the engines were in the factory, and they were getting worked on. So it's in their interest to keep them there, to use lots of different parts, lots of hours of labour, and then give them back eventually. I'm not saying that's what they did, but effectively that was up against, we only make money when they're up there in the sky. So they make money when the planes are on the ground and the engine's on the ground. The client makes money when they're in the sky. So what was the result that Rolls-Royce did? They effectively changed their way of thinking. They changed the industry and said, we will not do this anymore because our clients are making money when the engines are up in the sky. Why can't we make money when the engines are up in the sky? So what they did was they flipped it over and they effectively were paid to keep the engines in the sky. If the engines were down for any length of time, which would have taken time out of money making for the airline, then Rolls-Royce were penalised. So it was in both their interests to have that plane and that engine up in the air. Absolutely elegant and sublime. And that's what I think this way of thinking brings to the question of competitive advantage. It's making it elegant and sublime, but it's making it very practical. And the best thing ever, it's bucking industry standards. Industry standards are fine. Benchmarking, I hate it. It's a nonsense. It makes you adequate. So this is making you more than adequate. This is making you critical to the customer. This is making you change to their currency, whether it's reducing absenteeism, shifting soil, or having bums and seats in an airplane. Different currency from all those three suppliers, but then they sided with the client and the currencies converged. I've got a little sheet to tell you a little bit more about competitive advantage and the big 10 big things that you don't know about it. So you can download that from Edinburgh Institute. But I'd like to leave you with that thought with the three companies there, because either you can change the currency, you can move over, you can flip over, you can change your way of thinking about competitive advantage and do what those three companies have done, or you can do like the fellow on the right there, put a mask on, have a funny hat, polish up your product and service offer, and be quite glib and keep polishing it and robbing other ideas from elsewhere and following the next best business model or paradigm or technology. Or you can do it our way and get up to 2 years of an advantage. Now here's a little example to leave you with, is just imagine you had this kind of description of what you were planning to do. This is almost out from you could say it was from the David Brent School of Management Thinking. And David Brent, for those who you don't know, is the character in the satirical series The Office, which satirises management thinking. But here, I'll read it out. By thinking outside of the box, at the close of play of Q4, we hope to have drilled down, got our ducks in a row, and seen that our blue sky thinking has uncovered indicative markers, of a move toward a constant and consistent downsizing in tension with a corresponding normalization. Now, that was very hard for me to say, but that's how we get too complex. Instead of doing something and presenting something like this, I have a dream. Now, if Martin Luther King had said that, where would we be now? But he had a dream, and I've got a dream, that you guys can actually look at your competitive advantage, and instead of tweaking at it, instead of using the next management speak, instead of sounding like everybody else, doing something really remarkable, going over to your other side, the other side where the customer is, and using their currency rather than your own currency. And we can do that within 3 days. So what to do next? You can indeed do it in 3 days. You can do it and come to our lovely campus we have at Edinburgh Napier University. We're located within the university, up at the Craig Lockhart campus. We're a standalone institute, and we're dedicated to small businesses, and we'd love to see you up there. Or the alternative is, if you want to do it for a longer term, you can actually take on a non-executive director. Now, you may have non-executive directors. I'm sure you have directors, but you do have non-executive directors, which commonly are brought in to give you another wise head on the board. But what about having a wise head on the board that does nothing but look after competitive advantage? So you always have that 2-year advantage. That's worth a look. So please visit Edinburgh.Institute for both of those items. There's downloadable brochures on both. And come and visit us. If you're not from these lovely shores, come and visit us in Edinburgh, which is obviously the capital of Scotland, the best country in the world. And if you want to drop me a line, please do. That's my email address. It's david@writeonetime.com. And I hope to speak to you sometime soon. Bye for now.